Okay, well, Rand Paul is sticking up for TikTok. That was interesting. Very surprising turn of events. And then Dan Crenshaw on the opposite side of the aisle, he won't admit that the intel community is doing the exact same thing as TikTok and spying on Americans and trying to influence our perception of the world, influence our politics, like TikTok. He's one heck of a guy, let me tell you. And then we're going to talk about Tennessee. It's why I'm wearing my good old Tennessee hat today. And this is my home state and where I live. But we have some state representatives that are bent on turning, or at least seem to be bent on turning our state into Washington State. And by that, I mean a chaotic hellscape. You could say Washington State or California, whatever it is. We've got all of this and a whole lot more. This is going to be a great show. Buckle up and let's do it. I'm Jared, and this is Continue Freedom. Okay, so the TikTok bill. This is going to be the second time I've talked about this. Normally, I just hit it once and go. But Dan Crenshaw, we're going to talk about him first. He's fine going after TikTok, along with a lot of other representatives and senators, but he is not willing to admit that the intel community is doing the same thing against the American people and trying to sway our opinion and our view of the world and the view of politics and, how we should be voting and all this good stuff. So let's listen to Dan Crenshaw, who, if you've watched this show before, you know I'm absolutely no fan of Dan Crenshaw. And this was a post made by Tucker Carlson where he was kind of slamming him, and there was a little bit of back and forth on X or on Twitter. I think I said that. Did I say Twitter? Yeah, on Twitter. So let's listen to Dan Crenshaw and his justification for all of this.
TikTok has, which means data on all Americans, and with data and with access to your app that you're addicted to, you can vastly manipulate an entire population, which the Chinese have done already.
Are you worried that our intelligence agencies are doing the same thing domestically?
Am I worried that? I know that they're not.
They're not manipulating Americans? They're not controlling the flow of information?
Yeah. Did you have some evidence otherwise that you'd like to share?
I mean,
okay.
Before
That's
the
any serious questions?
Say ByteDance were to say
Congressman, you asked for an example of the U.S. intelligence agencies meddling in our information. What about before the 2020 election when 50 members came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation? Does that count?
No, because they were retired.
Oh gosh,
they were retired, but the FBI had the laptop for over a year.
There's nothing even close to what TikTok.
Okay, so it's nothing even close to what TikTok was doing. Nothing even close. This is my beef with Dan Crenshaw. He is what I consider a DoD and intel loyalist. That's really his position, and he's not going to do anything that's going to rub them the wrong way. He loves them. They love him. He serves his purpose, and I think he does more harm than good a lot of times because he seems to be there just to help Raytheon stamp out more weapons and not really anything more than that. And he's got some positive views on things like abortion, which is fine. He's great. We've got a vote going in that direction. But when we're talking about security, when we're talking about the intel world, when we're talking about the manipulation of Americans, I think that his loyalty to those organizations disqualifies him right off the bat. And we know that the Hunter Biden laptop, we know that that letter of 50 intel agents was waved all over the mainstream media. Look, we've got people. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to what the intel community is saying. These are our intel community loyalists, just like Dan Crenshaw is, and should not be taken seriously. So let's actually look at TikTok and the TikTok ban. And what do we know about TikTok? Well, we know that ByteDance, you've heard this name, and we're going to hear from Rand Paul, who's going to talk about that. But ByteDance is a company that owns it, and the senator, Rand Paul, he's normally kind of this stalwart, senator who's always coming down on the side of the Constitution. He came out and he said, no, TikTok itself is not necessarily a Chinese company, and it's owned mostly by the employees, by international investors. And some of those investors, let's be honest, I'm willing to bet are Chinese nationals. And should that be a concern? How much of it do they own? And if they are Chinese nationals who own part of TikTok, then there's zero possibility that they aren't somehow tied to the CCP, because no Chinese person who'd be allowed to own part of a company that's that valuable would be able to do so without having to pay their dues to the CCP. And Rand Paul came out very, very loudly and said that we have to prove this in a court of law that the company is transmitting user data back to the CCP. So we're going to watch a video from Rand Paul, and he got into a pretty heated debate with Brian Kilmeade. And again, I hate saying negative stuff about conservative commentators, but when they're big R, if they give indications that they are big R Republicans, I don't follow them. I don't like them. I'm no fan of them. And Brian Kilmeade is one of those guys. He's another war hawk kind of dude that is just he's ready to use, for the people in the DoD, people in the intel community. Well, I won't even say that. Not people in the DoD and intel community. Yes, senators and representatives. They see our military as a hammer, and to them, every problem looks like a nail. So it's just like, let's use it. And I'm harping on that because TikTok does delve into the, foreign conflict and all that kind of stuff, because it is the manipulation from what they are telling us is a foreign entity. That was more detail than I needed to provide. So let's go ahead and listen to Rand Paul.
Maybe you have some foreign owners. I don't know if everybody's an American citizen. And then what if they say, well, Fox News is giving misinformation on the election? You have a foreign ownership, you have misinformation according to the government, and all of a sudden they say, well, we're going to shut down Fox News, or we're going to shut down Twitter. So the bill isn't just about TikTok. It mentions TikTok by name, which is also a problem because laws are not allowed to target one company.
Yep.
But there is also a danger that it goes beyond that.
So I want you to hear with the FBI. So in terms of banning it, I think national security should trump that. And it being that we're finding out that Beijing is designing.
Okay, let's stop on that part. I think that national security trumps that. If this is a company owned by Americans, then Brian Kilmeade is saying, and again, this could be the premise that he is starting with, that it's not owned by Americans. But if this is a company, an American company owned by Americans, and he says our national security trumps it, then that in and of itself tells you that this guy is, the old I think it was Thomas Jefferson, or was it Benjamin Franklin? Those who were willing to sacrifice security over freedom deserve neither. This is what Brian Kilmeade is saying. I don't care. I think it's national security, so shut it down. That is very authoritarian and not in keeping with the values that I share. Let's keep going.
This algorithm to help divide America over the hot issues that you debate every day in Congress, from race to gender and all these other things. Knowing that it's been around since 2016, Gordon Chang came out and says it's like allowing 170 million spy balloons over America. And here's what the FBI director said yesterday.
That kind of influence operation, or the different kinds of influence operations you're describing, are extraordinarily difficult to detect, which is part of what makes the national security concerns represented by TikTok so significant. Americans need to ask themselves whether they want to give the Chinese government the ability to control access to their data.
So, I mean, doesn't that concern you? Do you think?
Well, let's also look at Christopher Wray. Come on. Let's be honest. That guy is one of the most manipulative politicians we've had in a federal law enforcement agency in a long time. He absolutely is a manipulator. We know that the FBI has been manipulating a lot of things. We know that the FBI is infiltrated with Democrat DNC operatives, Democrat operatives. So, yeah, his credibility is shot as well. So we have to keep that in mind. But let's keep taking this, because there's several layers that are going to get into this story.
See a difference? Do you think there should be maybe a listing of nations like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran that should not be able to own entities like this?
Well, here's the first thing, and this is the most important fact of all of this, and it needs to be debated and not assumed as a fact. The company is owned 60% by international investors, 20% by the two Chinese software engineers who developed it, the entrepreneurs who began the business, and 20% by their employees, 7,000 of whom are American. So it's a very diverse ownership. It's not owned by the Chinese government. In fact, on TikTok's board, there are no Chinese nationals that control this that are associated with the government at all. They're CEOs from Singapore. So this is an international corporation, and like every other international corporation, they deserve their day in court. You can't just take their property. Look, I have a lot of arguments with the Chinese communists. I have a lot of arguments with the Saudi authoritarians, but I'm not saying we should allow banning anybody to do business with the Saudis because they have an unsavory government as well, and because they spy on their people.
Senator, did you see the hearing, or were you part of that hearing? I can't remember what committee it was in front of, when the CEO of TikTok was there trying to rationalize why we should leave it in this country?
You know, I wasn't in that hearing, but I do know that they have been working very closely with our government to try to adhere to anything they can do to stay open in our business, in our country. They've offered and actually have transferred most of their data to Texas, to an Oracle cloud. They have review of the data by Oracle to make sure it's being controlled here. They're offering to go through what's called CFIUS. CFIUS is a procedure where foreign-owned government countries are trying to work to have American boards. They've also worked with the government to try to do
fundamental.
that.
I know about the Texas project, and I wish it was effective, but it isn't. We put $1 billion into it, or they did. But they did. He could not
but
assure
that's an opinion,
that
Brian.
ByteDance.
That's your opinion. That's your opinion.
No,
no.
Nobody thinks the Texas project did. No, but nobody thinks. Let me finish. Nobody thinks the Texas project is up and running and is effective.
I do. So the thing is when you say nobody believes that it is.
And let me just finish. They could not answer. The CEO would not assure that Beijing would not have access to personal information for 170 million Americans.
I don't think that's true. I don't think
which
that's
is
true.
number one with young people. It is true. The
But
number
even
one
if
with
it
young
were
people
even if it
is
were true,
now.
Brian, it's an allegation. You are making allegations against a company owned by Americans, and you have to prove it in court.
Who owns that company? Who owns that company?
60,
ByteDance is owned by China.
60, no, it's not. See, that's a lie, and you're defaming the country. You're defaming the company. 60% of it is owned by international investors, 20% is owned by the software developers who are Chinese, and 20% is owned by the employees, 7,000 of whom are Americans. So it's a complicated
controls the
ownership,
algorithm?
but it's not owned by the government.
It's not about profits. Who owns the algorithm?
TikTok owns their own algorithm, and it's actually not in China.
Who owns TikTok? ByteDance. And who owns ByteDance? The Chinese government.
No, they don't. See, you've just told a lie, Brian. You can't say on TV something that's a lie about a company.
Okay.
That is an out-and-out lie, and it's provably
what is
false.
A lie?
And they're not owned by the Chinese government.
He is. So it is very rare, by the way, to see Rand Paul willing to die on a hill like this, which is why it, in my opinion, lends some credibility to it. However, you have to go back to what TikTok has been doing, and TikTok has been manipulative with their data. They have been manipulative with the things that people are seeing. There are people researching the algorithm and researching the feeds that are being pushed to people, and it is overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian versus Israeli. It is overwhelmingly pro-vaccine over not. This is something that is being manipulated. But does that really make it any different than a YouTube or an Instagram or, I mean, I would say X isn't really as manipulative these days since Elon bought it. But it's not that much different than the social media companies that we have residing in the U.S. So you can attribute nefarious nature to it, but does that necessarily mean, as Rand Paul is arguing, that it is a Chinese company like we're being told? And that's kind of a question that I have, and I've been doing some of my own research, but I think that his standard of saying that if this company is owned largely by Americans and there's American employees that are involved in this, that are stakeholders in this company, that it should have its day in court. I don't think that's an unreasonable standard. But there's some more levels to this, so don't gauge me just yet, or don't judge me just yet. And here's the rub, that a lot of people have an issue with the tie between Senator Rand Paul and Jeff Yass. Now, you might ask yourself, who in the world is Jeff Yass? He's apparently the largest TikTok shareholder in the U.S., and he's the head of something called the Susquehanna International Group. Now, this is a very successful Wall Street trading firm with about $500 billion under management. And this isn't close, at $500 billion, it's not even close to, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and others that have trillions and trillions under management, but $500 billion is obviously nothing to sneeze at. And Jeff Yass has a net worth of around $27 billion. Some people say it's a bit higher, some people say it's a bit lower. And some reports say that as much as $21 billion of that is TikTok shares. Well, Jeff Yass and Rand Paul know each other, but maybe not directly. However, Jeff Yass has given $10 million in the past couple of years to Rand Paul's PACs. And he's also given millions to Thomas Massie as well. And if you know these two guys, they tend to be the more libertarian type candidates or representatives, rather. And if you read about Jeff Yass, he is obviously known to closely align with libertarianism. He's a member of the board at the Cato Institute. So it makes sense that he aligns with the more conservative senators and representatives. But these are my thoughts on this. While these ties are, to Wall Street and politicians, it's not anything new. There's very few politicians on the Hill that aren't somehow being influenced by Wall Street types because they have far too much money to not try to use it for their own benefit. And it's very disappointing to see two people like this, and like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, who I speak very, very highly of because of their willingness and their tendency to err on the side of the Constitution. I also recognize the fact that they can't all be Matt Gaetz types. Matt Gaetz is by and large getting most of his money from $20 donations from his constituents. But these guys need to be cautious with that sort of stuff, with the position that they are in as the more libertarian, as the more conservative type guys, being tied to shady companies like Jeff Yass and TikTok don't bode well for them. Now, I will also say, I don't think that either one of their positions, and I haven't looked deep into Thomas Massie's positions on this, so I can't. I'm generalizing with him, but with Rand Paul and the things that he has said, they actually aren't swaying far from their core beliefs. And like I say, I haven't heard anything about Massie or his explanation for this. But as far as Rand Paul, he's saying that we should put this to a decision of the courts and prove what is being done with the data of Americans. And he's opposed to a bill that gives unilateral power to the president. And all of these things actually align with his typical way of thinking, and honestly, with my way of thinking. But you can't deny the fact that the optics are absolutely terrible. And a few videos ago when I was talking about this, I said that it depends on what part of the bill depends on what they mean by a foreign adversary country. And I missed it the first time around, and how I missed it, I do not know, but I must have breezed over it. Either way, they define what a foreign adversary country means, and they specified that in Title 10, it's U.S. 10 U.S. Code 4872 D2. In that, it specifies North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. And so that is in the bill, in the latest version of the bill that I downloaded. If we want to ban those particular companies from running entities in America, I am 100% fine with that. So if it's true that this company is entirely Chinese owned, then ban them. And if that's the case and there's partial ownership by an American, but this is a fully Chinese-owned company, yes, ban them, and the libertarians like Massie and Paul will have to find another billionaire to pay for their campaigns. But if these are not, if this isn't a 100% Chinese-owned company, then this is setting a pretty dangerous precedent. And this is giving unilateral power to a president to start banning companies, and I have a huge problem with that. And that starts us down a very slippery slope. So I think that the argument around this bill, people are always going to try to shut us down and say it's either this way or it's that way, you're either right or wrong. And I think that in this instance, there is some shady middle ground that needs to be discussed. And there needs to be some more research done before we go off just banning a company. And it's a lesson for us as the voters that we have to remember the answers that we are being given are never as simple as they set them out or they lay them out to be. And the deceptions that are out there around any bill that's going through Congress these days, we have to consider the deceptions are many, right? We have to question everything. And our final decision on any of this, on where we sit on one side of a bill or the other, should always come down to constitutionality. And in this instance, it seems as though it might not be as clear-cut as we think. So there's my thoughts on the TikTok bill, and we're going to shift gears here very quickly to Tennessee. Oh, I love Tennessee. I'm so thankful that I moved back to Tennessee. However, there's a Tennessee lawmaker, and she's claiming that she feels like a slave in state Senate as pro-choice bill, pro-police bill passes. This is a psyop, right? On the left, this is absolutely a psyop. And she says she feels like a slave. This is how it always starts. They come to a solid red state, or I think she might actually have been born here in the state, which is fine, but she's being influenced by the same leftist talking points and the same leftist ideology. And they start playing a race card. And you start bringing slavery into the conversation. And you and Nashville has been purple. It's definitely blue now. And so, like the locust, they are starting to have an effect inside of our state. And when she comes out and she's angry about this, she's angry because she can't get enough of her Democrat policies passed in a red state. And she's coming from an area, by the way, where every candidate was a Democrat. Everybody that ran against her was a Democrat, and that was obviously in Memphis. And so she thinks that the whims of a Democrat stronghold should be spread around a state that, by and large, tries to maintain some semblance of a connection with our national values and with our Constitution. And so, Tennessee lawmakers, this is my message to you all. Loud and clear. Zero compromise. No compromise. Let them whoop and holler. Let them cry and pout. No compromise. Tennessee, Florida, Texas, though Texas is fading fast, and we've got South Dakota, we've got West Virginia, we've got Kentucky, which is also fading in a lot of ways. We've got Alabama, Wyoming. We hold a lot of territory. But the Democrats, as I said before, are moving in with a vengeance. And Tennessee is one of the top destinations for liberals that are escaping all these dystopian states. And again, I compare them, and it may sound rough, but I compare them to locusts. And they're the leftist locusts. And they're leaving the fertile ground that they've already torn down to the dirt. And they're threatening to gnaw our green pastures down to the dust. And so just like the hellscapes that they're leaving behind in California, New York, New Jersey, they're coming for our state, and they won't leave until they consume all of our resources and erode our freedoms. So I know who my state senator is, John Lundberg, and I know that my state representative, John Crawford, and my House rep in D.C. is Diana Harshbarger. These are the people that I need to track, that I'm going to follow on social media. I'm going to pay attention to what they're doing. And I haven't seen much that would disappoint me. But the minute that they cross the line, it's time to vote them out and open the door for more principled people to come in. And if they remain uncompromising with the left, then we let them stay. Because even in Tennessee, we have people like Charlene Oliver who want to bring the DNC platform into our state. And, she wants Chattanooga to look like Seattle, I suppose. But there's a video here from the Post-Millennial, and this is an absolutely horrifying situation with this person. Let me pull up the video here. Where did she go? There we go. This is what she wants. She wants to bring that same chaos that we saw in Seattle and Portland and cities across the country, in Baltimore. She wants to bring that to Tennessee, across the state.
In the face, and you might as well stomp on the grave of Tyree Nichols for bringing this bill. Yes, we are emotionally charged. Why? Because it's personal for us. Taylor made this personal the minute he introduced this legislation to target one family and one life that was lost. So yeah, we're gonna fight. Dr. King said the riots are the language of the unheard. You ain't saying nothing yet. If you keep silencing us like this, what do you think our district's gonna do? We have had it up here. Gloves off. Like, we're gonna fight like hell. You don't expect us to respond when you gaslight us every single day with these bills? There's a bill to get rid of the Tennessee Human Rights Commission that they're gonna bring, to abolish it, rooted in the Civil Rights Act, to make sure that we have protections for folks that look like Tyree.
Get a foothold in our states. Violent criminal only gets probation after stabbing a 95-year-old woman several times in San Francisco. This is the chaos that comes from this. On Friday, San Francisco man Daniel Koch was sentenced to just 5 years probation and a supervision program after being convicted of violently stabbing 94-year-old Chinese and Vietnamese immigrant An Ping Taylor in June of 2021. So during his sentencing hearing, which just took place, Judge Cade Sinan told Koch, "I am giving you one last chance to stay out of prison." According to the Daily Mail, instead of sending the criminal to state prison, Koch was enrolled in an intensive supervision court program for high-risk probationers. In reaction to the sentence, Assistant District Attorney Phoebe Maffei said, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, "The stabbing was senseless and horrifying and suggests a quick willingness to harm vulnerable people within our community." She noted that he should serve 12 years in prison. Despite Koch's history of criminal conduct, defense attorney Lisa Dewberry successfully used a neuropsychology report to show underlying trauma and brain injuries that caused him to commit the assault. This guy was, by the way, a repeat offender. This guy's a repeat offender. He goes on and stabs a 95-year-old woman several times. Didn't kill her, thankfully. But he was been convicted of multiple burglary charges and had spent over 100 days in jail. In another incident, he was charged in the fatal stabbing of a 55-year-old man. But the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. This is all about showing sympathy for the criminal, not for the victims. This is what happens. We see it in San Francisco. We see it across the country. We will get no justice. When Democrats are in charge, when Democrats get a foothold in your state or in your city, there will be no justice. Cities become soft on crime. We get chaos. We get destruction. And we get the normalization of evil. And that's what we had in that instance. And that's what we in Tennessee have got to stop. We love freedom. We love justice. We love our way of life here. We love the fact that this is a destination for people from around the country. But when they come here, we have to do our part and convince them and remind them that they are coming to a wonderful place because we vote a certain way. We vote 75 to 80% a certain way in this state. And so I'm telling the lawmakers now, this is my call to all the Tennessee lawmakers. No compromise. There can be no compromise. Just like on the national level, I always talk about compromising to the left versus the right, that when we say something is bipartisan means we're moving to the left. Bipartisan in a lot of instances should be a dirty word to us. We are conservative, we are Republican, and that's where it stops. If you want to compromise, you can compromise over to the right side. You can compromise towards a lifting of regulation, towards more freedom, more liberty, not away from it. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. You can go to continuefreedom.com and sign up for my mailing list, and I will see you in the next episode. Love you guys. God bless you.